Welcome to the City of Tampa's Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park and to this beautiful new River Center. Look around, isn't it beautiful? We are so pleased to be here to share some of Tampa's history with you today. We would also like to welcome you to our annual Archives Awareness Week. During this week, local archives come together to present their collection by offering a variety of special programs and exhibits. Our Archives Awareness Week partners have done a fantastic job offering programs and exhibits this week to share their collections. This brochure has a schedule for the week, and we hope you will enjoy the festivities. Archives Awareness Week actually began yesterday on the City of Tampa's 131st birthday. There was an outstanding program at Sacred Hearts Church in downtown Tampa. There were wonderful bits of information shared about parishioners that were former council members. At the end of the program today, you will receive a copy of today's program. 100 years ago, Tampa in 1918. Our speakers today are two of the contributors in the booklet, and they have some great history to share with you. At this time, we would like to recognize current and former elected officials who are with us today. Would you please stand? We would also like to recognize Donna Perino and others from the Mayor's Hispanic Advisory Council, as well as representatives from the Sister Cities International. Please stand. Today, we are privileged to have with us two very knowledgeable local historians who will be sharing Tampa's history through photograph and motion pictures. We would like to start today's program by welcoming Fred Hearns. Fred's career at the City of Tampa spanned more than 30 years. He retired in 2007 as Director of Community Affairs. He has a Master of Arts degree in Human Services from Springfield College and a Master of Science degree in Africana Studies from the University of South Florida. He's the author of Getting It Done, Rebuilding America, Brick by Brick. Today, he will be sharing with us his research on the birth of a race, which was filmed in Tampa in 1918. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you, Shirley, and good afternoon, everyone. This is truly a beautiful setting, and as I was inviting people, because I invited a lot of folk to come, I said, even if you don't want to come to hear what I have to say, you need to come see that building. You need to see this view and what we have here in downtown Tampa. I first want to also thank the elected officials who are here and my former co-workers and people who are keeping things running with the City of Tampa. I really miss you guys, and I do want to take just a moment and say a special thanks to the clerk's office, Shirley Fox Knowles, and Jennifer Dietz. Really came through, and she does every year, and she makes our job easy. Of course, CTTV, which is always on the scene whenever we're doing something special and preserving this history. Parks and Recreation for, of course, providing the venue. Andy Hughes, who's somewhere in the back, University of South Florida. Give Andy a hand, please. Stand up, Andy. Andy is the one who actually went out and made sure that we were able to get a copy of the silent film that you're going to see. Only about 10 minutes of it are still in existence. Originally, The Birth of a Race was more than 2 hours long. And over the years, all except 10 minutes have disappeared. But fortunately for us here in Tampa, those 10 minutes are probably the most important 10 minutes because they include several scenes of Tampa 100 years ago in 1918. So I'll get into that a little bit more as we progress. Probably everyone here has heard of the movie The Birth of a Nation. Done in 1915, D.W. Griffith was the director. It was called a cinematic masterpiece. It actually ushered in modern cinema. There were techniques used in that film that had never been used before. That film ran about 3 hours long. Never before had there been a film, and these were all silent films at that time. There'd never been a movie that had run as long as 3 hours. But The Birth of a Nation did. It glorified the Ku Klux Klan. It was based on a play and a book titled The Klansman, written by Thomas Dixon. And it really portrayed African Americans in the most negative light you could imagine, The Birth of a Nation. And so the purpose of this talk today is to demonstrate, to compare and contrast another film with The Birth of a Nation, which was The Birth of a Race, which came 3 years later. And again, as I mentioned, The Birth of a Race, much of it was filmed here in Tampa, Florida. Another word about The Birth of a Nation, The Birth of a Nation introduced some things into our culture that had never existed before. The burning cross that we now associate with the Ku Klux Klan, and those burning crosses burned in Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, all over the South, and in some areas out of the South. That was hatched in the film, The Birth of a Nation. That wasn't even a Klan idea. That came from that film. And there are many other influences that The Birth of a Nation had on this country. The film premiered in Los Angeles in 1915. It moved all the way over to New York City, and cities and towns, large and small, all across the country, as well as overseas, The Birth of a Nation. That film grossed over $50 million in the 1920s. Can you imagine what that would be today? No film had ever come anywhere close to that. That's how popular The Birth of a Nation was, and the racism that it celebrated. You probably heard the story, those of you who've done a little research, that the film was shown in the president's house. President Woodrow Wilson, who was at that time grieving. His wife had died a few months earlier, so he didn't feel it was appropriate to go out in public, but he did invite Griffith and Dixon to come to the White House and screen the film. And not only was he there, but members of the Supreme Court, the Congress, business people, important people from the press, and so forth and so on. So once the president put his stamp of approval on The Birth of a Nation, then it was only a matter of time before the entire nation was aware of this film, and it did tremendous damage to not only race relations, but relations here in America and abroad for everyone. The film only cost $100,000 to make, and as I said, it made over $50 million. Now that was The Birth of a Nation. Let me tell you, and I have maybe about 15 more minutes, so I'm going to move quickly. Try to stay with me. Then we're going to show the 10 minutes of the film, and then maybe we'll have time for 1 or 2 questions and answers. Let me go back to April of 1912 to talk about the second film I want to talk about that was part of racial vindication, The Birth of a Race. You know, with The Birth of a Nation coming out, doing all of this damage and creating so much violence that followed the screenings of the film, and again, it was during the Jim Crow era, it was one of the worst things that could have happened to this country. So people felt like there had to be a response to it. The Birth of a Race roots go back to April 1912 when Booker T. Washington was on a train trip down to Tampa. It was the practice of the last few years of his life that each year he'd visit a different state, and most of these states were in the South. By train, he had his own private car, and so 1912 was the year that he came to Tampa. He visited several Florida cities. Tampa was the southernmost city he visited. On his way from Ocala down to Tampa, of course, the train crossed over the Hillsborough River right about where Sulphur Springs is. Now, I haven't found any documentation to support this, but my theory is that Emmett J. Scott, who was on that train with Booker T. Washington, he was his assistant, saw all of the beautiful scenery, that we have here in Florida, and he thought he was going through paradise with the palm trees and the beautiful river. And many years ago, Sulphur Springs, some of you know this, was a big tourist attraction. It was like Busch Gardens. People came from all over to get to Tampa to visit Sulphur Springs. And so in his mind, I'm sure Emmett J. Scott said, one day if we ever do a film and we want to use a beautiful background that shows paradise, Florida's the place to go. And because he'd been through Sulphur Springs into Tampa, I have to believe that influenced him to encourage the filmmakers 3 years later to come back to Tampa and film in Sulphur Springs. And so that's what happened. January 17, 1918, the Tampa Morning Tribune ran a headline. It said, "Tampa picture players have registered intent to purchase WSS War Savings stamps." Of course, we were in the midst of World War I, or the Great War as it was called then, and Tampans and Floridians wanted to do their part. And so these war stamps, which I'm sure were like war bonds, were being sold everywhere to help finance the war, including here in Tampa. And so the actors who were here in Tampa in 1918, helping to make the film The Birth of a Race, supported that effort by buying some of those war stamps. Also in 1918, the Tampa Morning Tribune ran an ad asking that 250 Negroes report to Sulphur Springs to play extras in a motion picture. You're going to see some of those faces in the film we're going to show today. They're all nameless. We have no idea of any of their identities, but these were all local people who responded to that ad. The ironic thing is, once the film was completed, because of segregation, they were not allowed to enter the movie houses that screened the film. So they never got to see themselves in that movie. December 1st, 1918, The Birth of a Race opened in Chicago, and then it started moving all over the country. The problem was this film lost focus. Now, 1915, when The Birth of a Nation came out, the very racist film that glorified the KKK, we had not entered World War I. And so the focus was completely on the glorious South and how the South was going to rise again and how the KKK was going to be responsible for that second coming of the glorified South. And that was the entire theme of The Birth of a Nation. Well, 3 years later, after the United States got involved in World War I, now comes along a film that's going to respond to The Birth of a Nation, but everything had changed because we were in the middle of a war. And that's what everybody wanted to see, a war film. They wanted to see something or hear something about the war. So the theme changed. By the time The Birth of a Race was completed, when they shot the final scenes in Tampa, 4 different companies had handled the movie. And you know what happens when a project goes from one owner to another owner to another owner to another owner? You're so far away from the original intent that people forget what it was supposed to be about in the beginning. It was supposed to help bring the races together. They did the best they could, and you'll see a little bit of that in the film that we have. The film was shown here in Tampa on October 27, 1919. That's when The Birth of a Race was screened here at the Strand Theater in downtown Tampa. And as I mentioned before, those African Americans, local people who were in the film, were not able to enter the Strand. There were also some white actors who played minor roles in The Birth of a Race. Now, racial vindication in the 20th century, very quickly, this is how the country responded in addition to, in film, to The Birth of a Nation. There were legal challenges led primarily by the NAACP all over the country. There were protests. The most notable one was in Boston, led by Monroe Trotter, who was a noted activist who was one of those people who was not afraid to go on the front line, and he was attacked physically, was thrown in jail, but he never stopped protesting against showings of the birth of a nation. In the written word, we had the Crisis magazine, W.B. Du Bois, the Chicago Defender. Some of you have heard of the Chicago Defender, Pittsburgh Courier. And then in Tampa in 1915, we got our first black newspaper, the Tampa Bulletin, published by Reverend Marcellus Potter. Potter Elementary School is named for him, and his wife, Mary. So Tampa also responded as it could to this racist film. We had stage plays, The Star of Ethiopia, the most significant one, done by W.B. Du Bois. Research and scholarship, Arturo Schomburg with the Schomburg Center, which is still very active and very helpful in New York City with providing historical research materials. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH, and I'm very happy to say we have a very active ASALH branch here in Tampa, as well as St. Petersburg and all over the country. Then in the 1920s, the Harlem Renaissance, we had the Marcus Garvey movement. And while the NAACP took in thousands of additional members after the birth of a nation was shown in 1915, the Garvey movement took in hundreds of thousands of members. You hear very little about the Marcus Garvey movement because Garvey was vilified and thrown in jail, and his name became one that you had to be careful in whose company you mentioned Marcus Garvey. It's kind of like talking about Malcolm X. But Marcus Garvey had hundreds of thousands of people to join the Garvey movement. In film, we had the Johnson brothers in California, we had William Foster in Chicago, and the name that most of you probably have heard before, Oscar Micheaux. And the reason that Oscar Micheaux's work is more known is because he did more films than anyone else, and these were all silent films of any other African American. D.W. Griffith, the director of The Birth of a Nation, was so shrewd that he even went to Hampton Institute and Tuskegee Institute and got his hands on films that those schools had done to promote African Americans going to college, and he used those as an epilogue to The Birth of a Nation. That was his way of balancing off some of the criticism that he was getting that this was just a racist film. I could talk all day about that, but we don't have all day. Up From Slavery was the autobiography of Booker T. Washington. That was originally the intent of The Birth of a Race. This movie was supposed to sort of reflect the life of a man pulling himself up from poverty, becoming the most well-known African American in the United States, known all over the world. That was the intent. But again, the intent got lost when America entered the war. I'm going to end with just a few things about the movie itself, and you're going to notice that the director's name, John Noble, is prominently displayed. The theme of The Birth of a Race eventually became Peace on Earth, which I guess kind of includes the relationships of blacks and whites in America, but in the end, the theme became much broader than the original intent. You're going to see scenes from the Garden of Eden. Those scenes were shot in Sulphur Springs. You're going to see the palm trees. You're going to get a view of the Hillsborough River. I can even, 100 years later, recognize the Hillsborough River when I see it. And that's supposed to be the River Nile in the film. There were scenes shot at Old Hillsborough Bay, which we now know as Bayshore, that is supposed to reflect the Red Sea. You'll see that in the film. Then you're going to see the crucifixion, Jesus on his way to Calvary, and the African who stepped out of the crowd and helped lift up his cross. You're going to see that in the movie. Abraham Lincoln and emancipation is also reflected in the film. And the film is going to end with a scene that was really a wonder of modern technology in 1918, where you're going to see a black farmer and a white farmer come together in a field And I'm not going to tell you what happens next, but you'll see it in the film. But it's really a nice little touch. So let's show the film. It's about 10 minutes, and then we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions and answers.
give him another round of applause. We would like to present this certificate of appreciation and recognition of your valuable contributions to Archives Awareness Week. We really appreciate all that you do. And also,
They always have the best gifts, too. Thank you. Thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Fred, for your presentation and sharing the birth of a race with us. We now have something special to share with you. In 2017, the Honorable EJ Salcines donated an incredible historic photo collection to our archives. This collection spans over 40 years and includes the work of photographer Rose Rutigliano, Weekly, and Joseph Scalaro. Our archives and record staff has been busy digitizing it. Today, we will be showing a special slideshow featuring some of the highlights from this collection, while EJ shares his memories of the photographers. And now it is my privilege to introduce the Honorable EJ Salcines. His legal career spanned more than 50 years, including 16 years as our elected state prosecuting attorney, and culminating in his appointment to Florida's 2nd District Court of Appeal, where he served for a decade. EJ has 2 academic degrees, including his law degree, as well as 2 honorary doctorate degrees. He has received numerous awards and honors, including 5 awards of merit from the Florida and American Bar Association. In 1979, he was knighted by King Juan Carlos of Spain, who inducted him into the Royal Order of Queen Isabella. You can also catch him on TV with his popular CTTV series, Tampa, Untold Stories. You must check it out. We are honored to have him with us today. Welcome, EJ.
Thank you very much. Fred, when I saw them crossing one of the bridges, I wondered if it was the Fortune Taylor Bridge that they were crossing the Hillsborough River. But I compliment you. What a documentary to share with us. Ladies and gentlemen, Shirley Fox Knowles, the city clerk, who's been very kind in her introduction of me, is the city clerk for the city of Tampa. She has a treasure chest at her command. That treasure chest are the valuable archives of our great city. This week, we celebrate the City of Tampa's Archives Awareness Week, recognizing the need to document and preserve the development and unique heritage of Tampa archives. These Tampa archives are important because they provide evidence of activities, tell us more about individuals, families, and institutions. They tell stories, Tampa stories. They also increase our sense of identity. identity and understanding of the many cultures here in Tampa with firsthand information. Nothing is long ago in these archives. Our archives are treasure troves, benchmarks that document our past. And viewing our past brings back what is stored in a granary of our mind, the archives of our memory. The archives open up the past and can bring appreciation of rediscovering forgotten details, like opening an old box in the attic and finding old pictures, letters, and diaries that bring back forgotten events, forgotten persons, and historic moments in time. These relics, yes, these archives are relics. They spark our recollection, refreshing memories that have been forgotten in time. Photographs especially capture moments and events. Many have a special aesthetic value, others cultural depth. The collective snapshots, charming and remarkable photographs, images and film that you are seeing are a visual time capsule. A time capsule that opens up with an impression of life in Tampa, captured that moment and preserved forever. Thanks to two gifted photographers who, by their good eyes and excellent lenses and cameras, chronicled our community, our neighborhoods, our neighbors, our friends and acquaintances, as it was lived on a particular day, at a given moment. These document the harmonies and paradoxes of life in Tampa, Florida. These captivating visual special collections of Joe Scolaro and Rose Rutigliano Weekly do not claim to be the complete story or the full record of all that was happening in this wonderfully diverse and complex community that we live in and call our own, with its many shades of colors and lights between shadows. But these geniuses of the cameras, dark rooms, and lenses captured some of the secrets of life in Tampa in an infinite moment that passed as the camera clicked and captured that fleeting moment. In this special collection that you're enjoying, you'll find yourselves murmuring, "This is what Tampa was." You don't find yourself thinking, "I wonder what got Rose or Joe to snap these pictures." It's a tribute to just how good these photographers were, and a good statement of what photojournalism is all about. These photographs speak for themselves. They don't require explanation. The faces, the expressions, the gestures, all of those things. Look at the clothing, the surroundings. Each of them tells us a story as we see it. But there is a story behind these pictures. What a wonderful gift, a lasting legacy that Rose Rutigliano Weekly and Joe Scolaro have left to their beloved Tampa. But who were they? Rose Rutigliano Weekly was born and raised in West Tampa. In fact, I was her next door neighbor as a little boy on Cherry Street. She was raised there on Cherry Street, the daughter of Vincenta and Cataldo Rutigliano. Rose's father was a commercial and residential painter, and her mother was a cigar maker. Rose had a brother. Some of you remember Larry Rutigliano, who became an award-winning interior decorator and artist. Rose was a lifelong member of the Florida Photographers Association, as well as a lifelong member of her beloved St. Joseph Catholic Church in West Tampa. She attended A.L. Cuesta Elementary School on Cherry and Tampania, and was a graduate of McFarland Junior High, which we later called West Tampa Junior High, and then went on to Jefferson High School, and her companion was her camera. It became her hobby. Then it became her vocation. And then it became her profession. She was a pioneer in women photographers, and became a superstar. She had a long apprenticeship working, learning, and observing in the few photographic studios of West Tampa, Ybor City, and downtown Tampa. She made a name for herself early on, working at Robertson Fresh Studios, and then on to Tampa Photo Supply, where she met her husband, Bob Weekly, the owner of Tampa Photo Supply. Both he and son Robert III predeceased Rose, who never remarried and died at the age of 79, 2002, leaving son Richard, daughter Rosemary, and her husband John Hyde, 6 grandchildren, a host of nephews and nieces, and a battalion, yes, a battalion of local and loyal friends that called themselves the Rose Society, a sisterhood, always admiring and remembering a rare and memorable flower of the human variety called Rose Rutigliano Weekly, always doing things for others. Weddings and school pictures were Rose's career specialty. Joe Scolaro, on the other hand, was born and raised in Ybor City to Francesca and Antonino Scolaro. Joe Scolaro was an educator by profession whose hobby was photography, and in time it became his second profession. Both Joe and Rose were proud of their Italian Sicilian heritage. Joe attended VM Ybor Elementary School and graduated from Washington Junior High, then went on and graduated from Hillsborough High School, and then graduated from the University of Tampa. Joe married Mary Guida, and they had 2 sons, Anthony and Edward Scolaro. Mary, some of you will remember, was the longtime cashier at Wolf Brothers department store in downtown Tampa. Joe worked at Tampa Photo Supply, where he met Rose Rutigliano, and he became an early understudy of Rose and eventually a full-time photographer himself. Joe became a school teacher at Orange Grove Elementary, where he taught with my wife for some years. Then he became an art teacher at Memorial Junior High, and then became the first art teacher at a brand new Leto High School. He then became a media coordinator and was assigned to the Hillsborough County School System Administration in downtown, in charge of closed circuit television, and given a van specially equipped with television cameras and equipment. He did this up to the time of his retirement. He died at the age of 86, 1 year after Rose Rutigliano had passed away. Joe is survived by his wife Mary and sons Anthony and wife Laureen and Edward and wife Krisha and 4 grandchildren. Their work product is well documented in the thousands of negatives that both Joe and Rose have left for future generations to enjoy through their legacy, which has been scanned and digitized by the professionals at the Office of City Archivist in Tampa. Thousands of images covering 50 years, that's half a century of photography, to and for the people of Tampa. Photographic history documenting virtually all aspects of life and times in Tampa, the Tampa of the past, in a cross-section of our neighborhoods at popular events. We are so grateful to the Scolaro and Rutigliano Weekly families for this great gift. The Rutigliano Weekly and Scolaro joint collection present a unique, cherished pictorial record and history of the social growth in West Tampa, in Ybor City, and Plant City, from the end of World War II and almost to the start of the new 21st century. Their extraordinary gift to the citizenry of their beloved Tampa, of these thousands of photographs, all of which are now being digitized by the Office of the City of Tampa Archivist and their professional staff, and available for viewing and copying. These two gifted Tampa photographers, truly gifted photographers in their respective last wills and testament, left these precious gifts for all of us to enjoy. Over 22,000 photographs have already been digitized within the past year, and they are at least another 30,000 more photos that will be digitized within the next year. These photos will be made available on the public library's website, where about 3,000 have already been added. Jennifer Dietz, who is here, the archives and record manager, has been working to organize the photos with Allison Smith, who is also here, who has been scanning the images. We are so grateful to them for helping to preserve Tampa history. Jennifer Dietz and her able staff of professionals have culled from more than 50,000 negatives and selected these for our viewing pleasure and knowledge of how our town developed. These few thousand images only scratch the surface, barely hint at the infinite moments that pass through the cameras on a given day, on a given moment. Thanks to Rose and Joe, we now are able to appreciate Tampa life frozen in time for our enjoyment and for our children and their children and children for decades to come. Future generations will view these photographic gems with wonder and imagination. How Tampa was back then, when each picture made time stand still. The good old days come alive in these pictures. Some photographs you'll find very personally interesting. Some will be captivating. Others are evocative, dramatic, often stimulating our imagination. Some producing sentimentality and emotions. They document the dramatic changes that have taken place in the life of our community during the past 50 years plus, and the timeless aspects of our culture that has remained essentially unchanged. And almost every aspect of life in our community in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and some in the 1990s in 50,000 negatives, all Tampa memories. Half a century that saw Tampa's rich cultural melting pot blend into the American dream. Thank you, Joe and Rose, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy.
Let's give him another round of applause. Thank you. I would like to present to EJ this letter from our Mayor's Hispanic Advisory Council, and it reads as follows. Dear EJ, in Japan, there's a custom of designating persons who have demonstrated a lifelong commitment to a special talent, such as pottery or calligraphy, as national treasures. We have no such custom in our country. Only places are designated as national parks, monuments, historical sites, etc. Those are our national treasures. But had we such a custom as the Japanese, you would certainly be Tampa's contribution to our national treasures.
Wow. Wow.
On behalf of the Mayor's Hispanic Advisory Council and Mayor Buckhorn, who we serve, I send our fondest congratulations and best wishes as you turn the young age of 80. Like the finest wine.
Don't I look good for 80?
Oh, you do.
It's the olive oil.
Oh, okay. I remember that. Like the finest wines, you only become better with age. Our city and entire community is blessed to be able to enjoy the fruits of your historical research and your incomparable oratory. You have so generously shared over the years. Thank you for enlightening us over the years, and best wishes for many more years of good health and good stories about our past. This is from Anthony Perez, Chairman of the Mayor's Hispanic Advisory Council.
From your lips to the good Lord's ears, okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
We also have a gift for you.
Oh,
Okay.
Fred, I'll share mine with you, okay? You did great. Thank you, folks.
And if you will stay right here, want
Yes,
to
ma'am.
introduce or welcome members from our city council who will be making a presentation.
Would you kindly read this and I'll say it in Spanish? I don't speak English very well.
So we have a commendation from Tampa City Council presented to Judge E.J. Salcines. It's our pleasure to recognize Tampa's very own master chronicler, E.J. Salcines. His spellbinding rendition of Tampa's storied cultural past is always rendered in his classic, mesmerizing manner. It is with great pleasure that the Tampa City Council present this commendation with our best regards on the happy occasion of your 80th birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Guido. You did an outstanding job. Now, since I'm a politician, don't believe me because I can't say the whole truth all the time. EJ 80th birthday, 80 años, casado con la señora divina que está ahí. Usted no luce tan bien como ella, te lo digo ahora.
Thanks to her, I look so good, Charlie.
I don't know what you're saying. And what I want to say, en la casa de él siempre tiene las últimas tres palabras. Sí, mi amor.
Absolutely.
Después de fricar de todo, la que mandaba ahí, Elsa, párese un segundo. That is the real boss in the Salcines family. He is the mouthpiece, and that's the brains. Like my wife was Shirley. I appreciate everybody attending. What a wonderful guy. He's Mr. Everything. He speaks with the truth. He's helped so many people in the community, from going to college, from attending law school, no matter who you were. No matter what color you were, what height you were, what weight you were, EJ was always on your corner. Thank you for the 80th, and you have 80 more.
Thank you, Charlie. Those of you that were unable to understand what Charlie was saying in Spanish, here is a brief translation. In my house, I am the head of the house, but my wife is the neck. And the head doesn't move without the neck's permission. Te quiero. Thank you, Charlie. Wow, wow, wow. Wow. I gotta blow. 1, 2, 3. Wow. Thank you.
Again, happy birthday, EJ. We hope you have enjoyed today's program. We would like to thank CTTV and the Mayor's Youth Corps. We would also like to thank Shanae Logan, along with Sophie and Ashley from our Parks and Recreation Department at the River Center, for their assistance at this beautiful venue. We would also like to especially thank our Archives and Records Division with our wonderful staff, Jennifer Dietz, Dave Fredericks, who also helped with digitizing this beautiful collection, Allison Smith, and other great staff. Also, thanks to the City Clerk's Office for their contributions, including Sandy Marshall and many others. If we have overlooked anyone, Please know we appreciate you and your contributions. There will be many other great history programs during Archives Awareness Week throughout Tampa, and we hope to see you there. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you for visiting our beautiful city, River Center, and it is wonderful. So please patronize, and please come again. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.